Hey guys, since the exam's going to focus on the Q2, I'm going to switch our focus to that now when we do these review sessions. Hopefully you got a chance to do the Q2 on the AP Central website before you listen to the video. If you haven't yet, I would highly recommend you doing that one before you listen to the video. And if you're not feeling like writing the essay, I would at least try to stop and annotate the prompt. The reason that I suggest that so strongly is that last year's Q2 was extraordinarily difficult. It was more difficult than any I've seen in the past. So I think you need to practice on it. I anticipate this year's not being as difficult since they're only giving you one essay, but I think reviewing this one would really help you knock it out of the park. Like I've said with every time to write, your number one skill, whether it's the AP exam or college, is making sure that you look and you see what the task is that they're giving you. And the task this time is to make sure that you do about four things. If you haven't annotated the prompt yet, please pause here and annotate the prompt for a second. If you have, pause here and grab your notes on how you annotated the prompt when you did it. Hopefully you didn't just mentally do it. Hopefully when you take the exam, you have a piece of paper in front of you. What I'm going to do now is show you how I annotated the prompt. So looking at this, the first thing I did is highlight the word how, because that directly gives you emphasis on the fact that they want to sort of see your work, just like in math class, they want to see how you came up with your ideas. But I also highlighted the term complex experience because we've talked about that word being both negative and positive. I highlighted the word too, Penelope and Irene, which would tell you that a fully developed essay would talk about not only the experience of Penelope, but also the experience of Irene. And then it also points out that it's the complex experience of the two sisters within both their family and society. So skipping any of those things would cause you some problems. And then our last sentence, you may wish to consider such literary elements as style, style, tone, and selection of detail. So let me recap something I've said before in case you don't remember. When you write your intro, please don't feel like you have to list the devices in your intro. That can just be something that naturally is developed throughout the text. And especially when it says something like style, that refers to the stuff we analyzed when we did the Great Expectations unit. You wouldn't want to talk about, like, oh, the style is that he uses short sentences. If you run into a short sentence, just bring it up. Here's a short sentence that really emphasizes this one point. If you want to talk about how he's using a list of terms and lots of semicolons, just bring it up when you hit that point. You don't really have to put that in the introduction. It's actually stronger if throughout your essay you're blending different literary devices or different style devices or different details to make your argument better rather than organizing by just one of those devices. The next thing I've said is to try to make sure you do an introduction, do an outline before you start writing, and outline the prompt. So again, you want to explain the complex experience of Penelope, Irene, and relate it back to their experience within the family. And when you think about that, you want to think about how their experiences within the family develop their characters and how that family dynamic helps us understand their character. But then the big kahuna, if you want to get a 5 or a 6, is that you need to make sure that you relate their relationship with their family to the broader relationship of society and how it reveals a few things about their society. A lot of times they ask this question on the Q2, and it's almost always a critique. So you want to think about how, in many ways, society and the characters are foils for each other, how the behavior of the character reveals like the deeper meaning of society or the criticism within society. And what I found last year when kids were doing this is that their annotations weren't probably as good as they need to be. And for a passage like this one, I'd remember, again, you have to annotate for these four things: Penelope, Irene, the family, and society. And usually this is where I tell my students that having a tricolor pen or different colors of pens when you go into the AP exam is crucial. Normally, you're not allowed to use highlighters during the exam, as you guys know, but you could have used different colors of pens to annotate for each of these categories. Now, this year, I don't know if you're going to be allowed to print, and if you are allowed to print, I think it's going to be part of the time that you get. So I don't know that that's going to be something you want to do. I'm also not sure on the College Board website if you're allowed to annotate in different colors. Um, on my side of the fence, I'm not allowed to see how to annotate because I'm not a student and I can't fake create a student for College Board. They won't let me do that. So I guess I would need some feedback from you guys if you can annotate in different colors. But if you can't, what I would do is I would have a piece of paper in front of me and just make a chart and do it like this. Whatever your tasks are, make them a different column in the chart. And what I'm going to do now is show you the annotations that I did using different colors. If I couldn't do these in different colors, what I would have done is come up with some schema for annotating this way. Now, I want to be honest, like I already said, this one last year was very difficult for the students, and it was difficult because of how dense it is. There's a lot of text here, and I think students just started sort of writing before they fully comprehended. And I think had they more aggressively annotated, they would have done a little bit better. Having said that, my usual score on a Q2 for an entire class is a 7, and I rarely, very rarely have someone score below a 5. Last year, the class scored about a 6. I think that was partially because we didn't practice Q2s as much as normal, which I did this year. I remediated this year and had you guys do several at the beginning of the year. So I think you're actually in better shape than the kids last year. But I also think it's because the kids still weren't outlining and annotating the Q2. So what I did again is try to highlight this using colors. And by the way, that's all an assumption that I'm making about the kids last year when I talked to them about this passage and how they annotated it. So I might be totally off. I don't want to say anything bad about them, but my goal right now is to help you. So that's my best suggestion. So what I would do, like I said, is try to annotate in different colors. And if you see what I did here, I used green for Penelope, blue for Irene, purple for anything I thought referred to the family as a whole or the mom or dad within the family, and then I used red to show where the social critique was coming in. You guys could easily do these with like circles or dash lines or solid lines or double lines, anything you can do. So again, I don't know how you're going to annotate, but dotted lines, solid lines, anything like that. But if you can't, like I said, just jot down things on the chart. So if you notice, the first weird thing is I highlighted something in yellow, and that's because it referred to both the girls rather than just one. And it's the only sentence that does that, so I didn't know what else to do with it, so I just left it yellow. But the other complication kids said that they had last year was distinguishing between the two girls, and that's why I think the color coding system helps. What authors are going to use is they're going to use either stereotypes or archetypes. And you see here, that's kind of what the author did. He started out with Irene and the archetype of a girl with abundant leisure who likes to go shopping and who's very stylish. She spends hours working on her hair every day. That's what she does. And then it immediately juxtaposes her with her sister who has simpler tastes and would have slighted her dress, which means she didn't really care what she looked like. And that would help you with the next sentence below that says the elder sister went to many church lectures on a variety of secular subjects. Would a girl who spends hours doing her hair also spend hours going to church lectures? No, and that is the stereotype, I know, but the author did that to juxtapose the two, so that's how you could kind of tell that Penelope's the older sister and Irene's the younger sister. The kids last year had a lot of trouble with that, and they asked me how they were supposed to have figured that out. And what I said is, always go back to stereotypes, archetypes, see if it fits. Irene complained that her sister scared away young men. Um, that also helps you realize that Penelope's the one who's going to lectures and making fun of them. She listens to like a serious professor give a secular lecture in a church, and then she comes home and gives like a really funny account of, whatever he was talking about. And that scared away young men. And there's where you could start some social analysis. Obviously, someone who goes to a lecture and kind of comes back and gives a comedic account of it is probably pretty intelligent. And it's interesting that the men are scared of this girl for making sort of witty commentary about it. Um, and and the fact that Penelope doesn't care that the men are scared kind of helps you understand Penelope a little bit. But when you get down into the next section, here's where you really get into the social commentary, and you needed to look at your footnote for this. The girls had learned to dance at Pampanetti's, but they had not belonged to the private classes. They didn't even know there were private classes, and there was a great gulf between the girls who had the private classes and the girls who did not. And this is one of the reasons why we read Great Expectations this year. It's an allusion back to the have and have nots. This sort of shows us again the sort of connection between their family and society. It's the fact that these girls are not the really cool girls in society. Guys are not hitting on them. Um, and then once you start getting into the purple stuff, you get a bigger picture. It explains their father didn't really like to socialize. He didn't like to have fancy parties. The mother was too rustic, which means like too unaware of really formal manners. They didn't really grasp the idea of traveling to Europe, which again would sort of allude to us that they don't really understand the morals of the upper class or the values of the upper class. It also says they witnessed the spectacle which such resorts present throughout New England of multitudes of girls who are humbly glad of the presence of any young man. So these girls, the mom and the girls, are seeing these resorts, which are basically set up so that girls can get married, and they they see this, and they see that the girls are basically there to meet men and are there to flirt and are really glad if a guy talks to them. But then you get the idea that they had no skill or courage to do that themselves. So it's not that they're critical of those other girls, it's that they lurked helplessly trying to make friends. Um, and it said perhaps they didn't care to. And it says that maybe they didn't care to because they were content in their own ways. And they were content because of the strength of their mutual affection, which is a barrier to worldly knowledge. They dressed for each other, meaning they only wore what the other person thought was cool, and they made their house comfortable to them, and they lived basically for themselves, and not because they were necessarily selfish, but that's just the only window on the world they had. And then you get that idea again that Penelope did not care for society. She had no interest in going out and making girlfriends. She had no interest in hitting on boys. Um, and then it does say that Irene, who is younger, was just not old enough yet to want to try to be cool. And then you get this like great analysis of her that says that she's beautiful, but she was unconscious of it. She dressed well, but not because she knew about society. It's more that she just instinctually knew what fashion was. Um, and it said that she had scarcely lived a detached individual life. She had depended on her mother so much, and she had depended on her mom and her sister for every opinion. And now that she's met this guy she's kind of interested in, she's for the first time beginning to form ideas, and her own ideas, which were often mistaken ideas. So you got to take that, and that's all you got, and talk about the two girls and their relationship to their society. So there's not necessarily a right answer and a wrong answer, but there is an expectation that you only use the evidence within the text to come up with an argument here. Um, and the argument College Board was really looking for was the fact that although family relationships can make someone very comfortable and contented, they may inhibit people from living a different life, which has different things to offer. And it's not really necessarily that the Laplands are being criticized or that he hates society. It's just more so that um, it's sort of like a meaning of life kind of theme that, like, if you only experience one lifestyle, how can you know the world beyond it? And that's kind of what's happening to this family, is that they're so locked into their lifestyle, they're not really experiencing the world around them. Um, and the author's saying maybe that's okay, but on the other hand, it is leaving them unaware of certain knowledge. So what I want you to do is look at GG, and what I did here is very similar to what I did in a previous video, is that I highlighted in yellow um, ideas that are analysis, and then I highlighted in blue what is textual evidence. And if you look, there's some really good textual evidence, some really good analysis here. America has often emphasized learning values from one's family, but making sure it depends time in society truly cultivates your personality and identity. I think that's a spot on, exact argument that that passage is making. Um, and affection and family bonds shelter people from society's attitude, and that there is a tension between familial intimacy and the fact that society can be inaccessible because of the way sometimes families are organized. I think these are like really beautiful ideas here. And when you scroll down to two, the second paragraph, again, you'll see he talks about, or she talks about, the insular and idealistic nature of the family. And then if you skip down, there's that beautiful thing. Rather than actively engaging what was outside the lamp, Flem stared at the window and wanted in on it, including um, passivity and lack of readiness to engage with the world around him. Looking through the window is symbolic of the Laplands looking out at the world that cannot access or understand. Okay, this is where we start to see a little bit of a breakdown. There's an assertion here that they wanted in on that activity, but there's no textual support to say they wanted in on it. And actually, if you go look at the passage, it doesn't say they wanted in on it. It said that maybe they didn't want in on it. Like, it sort of gave the idea that maybe their interpretation is equally valid. Um, so if you keep reading, you see the next part is a lovely um, description of one of the girls. And the narrator seems almost to be afraid to identify which girl it was. They tended to, like, not give the kid's name. But here it says her beauty was evident, but it meant little. She had no one to admire or desire her beauty. Despite her happiness, this shows how beauty and personality were wasted by her constantly being in the house. What I did is say this is an opportunity fail here. It would have been an opportunity to connect this back to society. Because if you notice in that society, it sort of implies that actually the way to connect to society is that you have to be a part of it. You had to be invited to go to the secret dance lessons, and you had to go to these resorts and sort of find a way. Instead of lurking helplessly, you had to find a way to be like assertive and aggressive and meet people and talk to people. And what actually, if you look carefully at that passage, when it says she's starting to form ideas of her own because of things that boy's saying to her, it's kind of implying that because she's so beautiful, society's always going to embrace someone like her who's naturally stylish and naturally beautiful, and eventually it's going to pull her out of that connection with her family, and they're going to have a hard time relating to her because she's going to try to fit into the bigger world, and it's going to cause a little bit of a conflict. So basically what I wanted to say, if you go down and you look at the rubric, you'll see that this one got a 131, which is again a very rare thing to get. A 131 means that there's a lot of analysis, which is good, and if you look at my highlighting, that supports that, but it's also saying that the text support there is just, or sorry, the commentary and analysis is just not quite there to fully support their assertion. And I think you can see that disconnection when you look at it. Now, if you look at the next one, here, the sample C, um, it's almost like the exact opposite. You can see that there's so much text support and very little analysis. And the person who wrote this asserted, "We constantly feel the need to seek acceptance and adoration of others, but warn against the dangers of an overly sheltered life." Okay, that is okay. It's an okay assertion. It does warn against the dangers of living an overly sheltered life, but does it argue that we seek acceptance and adoration? I don't know. I don't know that that's what the text says. And then when you look down at the blue part that I've highlighted, you'll see here that that is just a lot of text support. It's a lot of summary. Um, and then this kid starts asserting that the author's criticizing how girls and families are obsessed with impressing others and climbing up the social ladder. And then in the yellow, this could be a detriment to the girls when they want to get married. Of course, a liberal perspective would complain there's no need for daughters to get married as the social norms of the day define. Um, that's not in the text. Like, if you go back and you look at the actual text and what it says, there's nothing in there critiquing the idea that girls are going to get married. This is something this kid brought into the room with them from some other text and tried to force onto this text. So what I just want to say, the last sort of comment with this essay that you're looking at is Howell does stress the importance of thinking for yourself. Although the family's nonconformity suited him, Irene was only conforming to her family's beliefs. This kid is like half right and half wrong. So what they did is do a 1-3-0 on this one because there was so much textual evidence, but because the analysis doesn't seem connected to the evidence the kid's doing, the kid did not get the sophistication point. And then when we go down to the next passage here, which is sample P, you'll see that this one is increasingly less developed. It just mentions the sisters see the societal point as foreign, that they are isolated from the world. The sisters are different and they're both isolated. But then what happens is when you get down to the bottom